Yes, so we are live now. Good evening, friends. First of all, let me take this opportunity to wish everyone happy Ganesh Chaturthi. May God Ganesha give each one of us strength to come out of the current situation everyone is, passing through. On behalf of Valencia Acumentis, I welcome Dr. Payal and Dr. Narendra Rungta from Jaipur. So it is our, we are fortunate to have amongst us these both the experts who will, enlighten us today on a public awareness program. And the topic we know is first aid management at home, which currently is the need of our. So without wasting time, I want to first, we will begin with I'll introduce our speaker, Dr. Payal Bhargava. So, Dr. Payal Bhargava is from Hyderabad. She has fellowship in infertility, IMA Hyderabad. She's a life member of IMA Menopause Society, uh, India PCOS India. She's in the managing committee of PCOS Society India for clinical research and awareness program. Co-founder and director on board of Divine Magic Foundation. Co-founder and director on board XPS Analytical, medical officer at FPA India, consultant at Sri Krishna Diagnostic Center, visiting consultant and Pradhana Hospital, Madhapur. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, Reena, for the kind introduction. On the auspicious occasion of Ganesh Chaturthi, Divine Magic Foundation is privileged to have with us critical care icon Dr. Narendra Rungta to share his thoughts with us. Dr. Rungta is the chairman and founder of Critical Care Foundation Jaipur, India, a non-profit making trust registered with Government of Rajasthan. Dr. Rungta is an internationally recognized intensivist known for his expertise to treat both critically sick adults and children. Dr. Rungta is dedicated to spreading awareness amongst medical professionals and the general public about the specialty of critical care medicine. He runs an online course on critical care to learn from the best practitioners and teachers in the medical fraternity. This is how I came to know about Dr. Rungta. Our today's webinar is about discussing how to manage medical emergencies at home till the help arrives or a patient is shifted to hospital. Anisha, full screen. Our today's topic of discussions are heart attack, cardiac arrest, epilepsy, poisoning, snake bite, burns, and COVID. So, sir, how to recognize a heart attack at home?
Hello, Payal. Hello, Reena. I wish to thank you for inviting me to this very important public awareness program. At the same time, I must greet you all, the audience who are participating and viewing this program on Ganesh Chaturthi's day, and congratulations to you for having this program for public. And I understand, as I have you been informed, that's a charitable free program, and you have been organizing such programs time and again. So thank you, Reena. Thank you, Payal, for getting me here, and I'm so delighted. So about heart attack, you see, heart attack is a very, very common problem. And heart attack is responsible for highest number of deaths in the world. And India is fast becoming the capital of deaths because of this particular medical emergency. And the age or background disease is no more the issue left with heart attacks. Suddenly you find that a young man who has been doing well had returned from office yesterday at around 8 p.m., had dinner, played with his children, and suddenly is found dead the next day in the morning without showing any signs or symptoms or without even calling for help. But I am of the view that no disease comes without pre-warning signs, early warning signs. And it is very important to identify early warning signs. So early recognition of early warning signs of any disease go a long way in saving a particular patient and getting treatment right in time before the disease takes the toll. Chest pain is the most important thing. Chest pain does not mean only chest pain. Chest in the back, chest in the denture, chest around mouth. No more a classical radiating pain to the left upper arm. Now, when it is associated with sweating, helplessness, feeling of sinking, it all the more becomes more apt that you may be having something like heart attack. I am not using the phrase myocardial infarction because it's for general public, so we'll move with heart attack. What needs to be done immediately? Now, if he has been a known patient of cardiac diseases, he must be having with him in the household a tablet of aspirin or some of the nitrites. So he can take some nitrate immediately and a tablet of aspirin. That is all he can do. And other than that, it should be organized to move to a nearest healthcare facility where some treatment for cardiac management is available. Now, I would also like to add here that we should not lose time. The patient's family should not lose time in calling the family doctor and identifying the disease and take to the hospital only if the family doctor confirms or a nearby nursing home confirms. All these patients should be, without loss of time, taken to a hospital where facilities for some cardiac treatment will be available. Once that is there, then it may not be very important that you can have a PTCA within 1 hour or something like that. Some interventions can be done. Even if a medical professional is able to identify that it is heart attack and able to thrombolize, give a specific treatment, which is now known to almost 90% of doctors. In Western country, it is the nurses also, they are also allowed and permitted to treat these patients in emergency with thrombolysis and the first aid treatments to these patients. So aspirin and nitrates. I do not advise any other disease, any other drug for these patients at home. And the purpose is don't lose time. And don't be unnecessarily overconfident that you have taken tablets or medicine, so you will be fine. Exclude the disease. Visiting the hospital is very, very cost effective. The worst is waste of time, some money, but look at the benefit, look at the dividend. You may save a life. He may be, bread earner of the family. And some families are, in serious troubles once the bread earner of the family dies. So what do you do if you are alone at home and you have an attack? Call for help. Give a dial to local ambulance number. Rush to the hospital. Call your friend or relative if anyone is there. But at the same time, you must call an ambulance. Or if you are in a position to just take a taxi and move to the hospital. That is the advice, and that's a strong advice. What we say in our evidence-based medicine, evidence 1 plus recommendation A. So that's my answer, and that's my advice to your audience.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. So we'll move on to next topic. Questions we'll take after this, sir.
Sure.
So next topic is cardiac arrest. What is cardiac arrest? What needs to be done? And few steps of CPR which can be performed by layman, sir.
So this is a very important topic in the sense that every single citizen of the country, including children going to a primary school, should be taught and trained about something to intervene in case of there is a cardiorespiratory arrest. First, you must understand what is cardiac arrest. Cardiac arrest means stoppage of heart and respiration both, and the patient stops breathing. So first confirm that there is a cardiac arrest and organize to shift the patient to the hospital as early as possible. But don't sit idle. While the help is coming, start CAB. And what is CAB? Circulation, airway, and breathing. And circulation is, just start giving precordial area on the chest, pushes. Start pushing the chest, and you have depicted it very nicely with these diagrams. And you just put clasp your both palms, on the dorsal, through a dorsal sulcus, your fingers, clasping onto the left hand. If you are a right hand, then left hand under the right hand, or if you are a left-hander, then right hand under the left hand. And to stand on the left side of the patient is the best thing to do, and just put your palm, the thicker surface of your palm on the lowest part of the chest, above stomach, where stomach begins, the abdominal area begins, where a small angle is formed just above on the left side, slightly on the left side, but on the sternum, and start pushing 2 inches at a time, not less than 100 per minute. And that means you have about split 40 seconds for each cycle, 4 seconds for less 0.4 seconds for each cycle, and allow recoil of the chest before you move on to another. So recoiling is very, very important. Confirm, start pushing, and if you can do it, do mouth to mouth respiration and give 2 rescue breaths, full mouth to the patient. Open the mouth and retract the neck of the patient posteriorly, like you have shown in the chest. Call emergency, check vital signs, lift chin like this, and give rescue breaths and perform CPR. Start with pushes, what you call CPR, and CPR consists of pushing chest wall posteriorly 2 inches deep, not less than 100 per minute. With each push, allow recoil before you start another push. You can do it for 3-4 cycles yourself, and in the meanwhile, I'm sure you would have called for help and somebody would arrive. And in the meanwhile, I'm sure you would have sent for ambulance call. At public places, when you are at public places, now it is almost becoming mandatory to have automatic these defibrillators available at places. So you should look for that and apply that, and that goes such a long way that it may really save a life. And the chance of revival of this patient if he receives immediate CPR in case of cardiorespiratory rate is, tremendously dividend paying, and you may save at least 40% of the patient. So, but that has to happen within minutes, and definitely within first 3-4 minutes. So that is it. And don't try to do a lot of things. Don't try to give postures. Don't waste time. Two things are the most important: giving a particular chin lift, jaw thrust, 2 rescue breaths, and mouth full, and see that the chest is rising. And don't allow any leaks. But do that only if you are sure that the patient does not suffer from any serious kind of disease before he had a cardiac arrest.
Thank you so much, sir. So coming to our next topic of epilepsy. What is epilepsy, seizure, or fits? What needs to be done immediately? The do's and don'ts of epilepsy.
So first thing, everything that glitters is not gold. Everything appears like epilepsy may not be epilepsy. Epilepsy is a disorder in which the patient has abnormal involuntary movements, usually associated with frothing, sometimes or most of the times with loss of partial or complete consciousness, and many times with passage of urine or stools. This happens more commonly in children, less commonly in adults. So first thing, if you do not find, if the patient is conscious, talking, and is having abnormal movements, it is not epilepsy. Sometimes in spite of when you lose your cool and lose your temper, and your appearance may be hysterical, looks like suffering from some kind of epilepsy. So that is not epilepsy. So my first suggestion is don't panic. There is no room for panic. Number 2, loss of life during or in post epilepsy, immediate post epileptic period is very rare. So there is enough time for the patient to be shifted to the hospital or nearest healthcare facility. You can take such patients to any hospital or even a small clinic during the epileptic disorder. You don't have to go to or reach a big hospital only. Number 4, don't put anything into patient's mouth. Don't make him smell a shoe or any old cloth. Don't try old remedies which are suggested conventionally or traditionally. Don't do anything. Don't try to give any specific treatment. Don't put even water or sprinkle water or cold water on the patient's body. What you have to do, loosen his clothes so that he does not have problem in breathing. Clear his throat if there are any secretions, so can he breathe very comfortably. Give him a lateral position so that he does not aspirate. Aspiration is, inhaling your own vomitus. Sometimes these patients also have vomiting and some secretions in their throat. While being unconscious, it is not unlikely that they might inhale some of these vomiters or secretions into their windpipe, which will really choke their breathing. So give them a lateral position. Sometimes it is also called rescue position. And don't give them any specific treatment. Don't come under pressure of anybody to give a specific treatment. There are lots of suggestions which usually are observed. When such things occur, people come, run, rush, not out of, any bad intention. The intentions are good, but the knowledge is lacking. The conviction is lacking. So that is my advice, and take him to the hospital. And don't panic, because epilepsy or post-epileptic period does not lead to loss of life usually.
Thank you so much, sir. What needs to be done was really important in epilepsy patients. Now,
Pardon?
coming to seizure in kids, sir.
Yeah, seizure in kids are very common.
Yes, sir.
So seizure in kids are very important, and for the mother, it's a horrible sight. And I remember a case of child in a pediatrician's family having seizures, febrile seizures. Febrile seizures are harmless seizures. So he had one seizure, and then he explained to the family and to his wife, it was his own son, that don't worry, these are febrile seizures and they are harmless. They will go in couple of minutes. And after 6 months, the same child had another seizure, and the mother of the child, I don't call it her wife of the pediatrician, but I call her mother. So mother is a mother, and she told the pediatrician, her husband or the father of the child, that you may be a pediatrician, and look, I don't want to see this sight again. This should be the last time my son having this kind of problem. So, this is the kind of passion, this is the kind of affection, and so this is the right, no blames. We don't blame mothers. I have been a pediatrician myself. So the sight is horrendous. So again, the same principles are applicable to a pediatric patient as to the adults. They are more common in children, particularly in summers, particularly when they have fevers. At least 5 to 8% of children worldwide have incidence of one or the other time, incidence of seizures, tonic or clonic or both. So it's a very common problem in children, and these are primary idiopathic seizures. Then there are a number of secondary seizures because of meningitis, other neurological problems, aminoacidopathies, when the child has hypoglycemia, low sugar problem in their blood, or even sodium. If sodium goes down, salt goes down in their blood, or salt goes up. Both are, and that happens particularly after diarrhea and vomiting. And we, as a rule, advise mothers to give a lot of oral rehydration solution. So over jealously, they might concentrate it or they may dilute it. So if they dilute it, it may become hyponatremic, poor in salt. If they over concentrate it, it may become hypernatremic. So the child may have either kind of seizures. That is one of the commonest. So febrile seizures, sodium related seizures. Again, the same principle should be applied. Don't put anything into the child's mouth. Loosen the cloth. Give a lateral position. Move him to the hospital as early as possible. Don't give anything to the child unless you have some training, or that your child is epileptic patient, he has recurrent seizures, and then the doctor must have advised you, given you midazolam, a syringe. You can give it intralectally, you can give it sublingually, you can push it into the nose. Then you know about the dose, the places. You always can't get the IV line in children. Even some doctors or nurses also may not get an IV line. Particularly when you are panicking, it becomes a little more difficult to put the IV line. So don't try that, don't attempt that. Prevention of complication is all that you need to do. You don't create new problems of aspiration and unnecessary drugging the child. Intrarectal route of administration of midazolam of late has become quite a good safe proposition in case children who suffer from recurrent seizures that can be practiced. Particularly, this is particularly true for those who have febrile seizures and those who are not receiving prophylactic anti-epileptic.
Thank you so much, sir. Moving on to next topic. Household poisoning, a very common topic, sir. What is poisoning? How to prevent, especially in kids, and what to do?
Now, there are, two kinds of poisons: real poisons and relative poisons. And our household, as you have shown in your slide, is full of poisons. Whether it is kitchen, bathroom, bedroom, handbags, particularly of mothers, uh, shade of garage, as you said, garden. And those who have gardens, you have insecticides there being placed, lot of mushrooms are there. In kitchen, you have all kinds of detergent, soap related, caustic related things. And even in our traditional homes, we have, these insecticides or rodenticides. Now the incidence is decreasing, fortunately, but still in our rural settings, we still see these rodenticide associated poisonings. So they should be kept out of reach of the children who do not understand. In rural India, when it is very warm, there is a practice of keeping there was initially a practice of keeping kerosene oil in glass bottles or plastic bottles. And when the child would feel thirsty, then he would, ingest this kerosene oil, taking it for water. Now then came colored kerosene oil. So it was different, but the child would not understand whether it is colored kerosene oil or a drink. Therefore, still kerosene oil poisonings continue to be seen in emergency rooms. It is relatively not very dangerous poisoning, but it does produce morbidity and mortality. So, particularly kerosene oil, bad detergents, and caustic containing bleaching agents should be kept out of reach of children. That's for sure. And shampoos, aftershaves, particularly nail polish removers. These are little tricky chemicals, and they can produce serious problems. These days, household alcohol consumption is not a rare thing. So sometimes the child sees his father or uncle or seen consuming alcohol, and when nobody is around, if the child finds a bottle, he would directly cling to it, and we not rarely see alcohol ingestion by small children. Petrol, paraffin, car products, and my common advice is keep them away. Keep all these things out of reach of children at a height, in locks, or do not allow children to move into these areas. And if they are moving, they should be clearly protected, guarded, and somebody should accompany them. And once in a while, it is the duty of the parent to tell the children about the problems associated with touching, handling, consumption of all these chemicals, agents, household detergents, soaps, etc., etc. Fortunately, with advent of internet, and the children have become these, smartphone savvy, so they are becoming smarter and not more prone to these particular agents these days.
So what to do if poisoning occurs?
If poisoning occurs again, the same principle will apply while and the old habit of inducing
Vomiting.
emesis is
Yeah.
not recommended,
Okay, sir.
right? The syrup of ipecac and inducing a reflex vomitus, that is not indicated. That was seen to be associated with more problems than helping. So the simple thing is remove the child from the site of poisoning. Remove the clothes. Wash the body till help comes or the child is moved to the hospital, because particularly these organophosphorus things, they are absorbed through skin, palm. If the child has handled, wash their palm, remove their clothing totally. You may clean his mouth, his child's mouth particularly, or adult's mouth particularly. If it is adult, then it is good to move the patient to the healthcare facility as early as possible. If it is caustic, then you may apply some, rinsing agents inside mouth, but you have to make sure that it is light, it is not taking time, it should not cause harm. If it is burning, the patient is complaining, then you may apply some soothing agents. Cold water, ice cold water is a very good soothing agent. So you may, with a soaked cloth piece or cotton piece, you can clean the mouth, and you will provide him a lot of soothing, and sometimes people advise washing of taking a quick bath, in case of organophosphorus poisoning. Yes, if you are sure that it is organophosphorus poisoning, a quick bath or putting a bucket of water over the body and then slowly rinsing may help. But my advice is call for help. Don't try to induce vomiting. You can't do anything big, and removal of separation of the patient. Now, carbon monoxide poisoning has been very common in rural India, because in olden days you had small chulas or sigris.
Yes, sir.
They were used, and the smoke, the room would be made airtight, not to allow very cold air inside the room. That was the way of keeping the rooms warm, and everybody would sleep, and carbon monoxide generated would have no access to pass out, and patients would be found dead in that case. And that is what happens, in burning. Less people die with burns, more people die with smoke inhalation.
Yeah.
So in that case, you can protect with wet blankets, so it absorbs smoke. If there is a smoke around, then or if you do not find, you have no time to take out blankets in hot weather, summers, then even bed sheets, they are quite porous, and soak them in water very well, and make a curtain between the smoke and yourself. So most of the smoke will be absorbed by this wet cloth, though the woolen blankets are quite effective in that case. In case poisoning is in the eye, flushing the eye with cold water, running cold water is very important. Do that for good time, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Don't worry, extra washing is not bad, but don't massage your eyes. Don't put pressure on your eyeballs. That may cause erosion, because you do not know what the poison or agent is causing inside. Most of the time it is soap or shampoo which is run into your eyes. And the only solution to this is wash your eyes very well with water and don't massage, because associated with irritation and watering and redness, there is some itching also. So don't do that. In case of poisoning of the skin, washing skin goes a long way. I have talked about inhaled poisons. This is particularly carbon monoxide. And so protect yourself and open all the windows if they are open. Sometimes you have household gas that may create a havoc in the house. So open all windows, even big doors if you can do that, to let the bad air or bad smoke get out as early as possible, as much as possible, and protect yourself and your family.
Okay. Coming to snake bite.
Snake bite, India still remains one of the endemic population victim of snake bites, particularly because of our age-old practice of open air defecation and eating ourselves, even on when we are driving on highways. And the farmer population, while they are working in fields, they go into the corners of fields, and that happens particularly during rains. And it is the rainy period when the snakes come out of their hideouts onto the surface, and they bite on the feet of the patient, and sometimes they crawl onto the people who are sleeping on roads, on the roadside, on the rooftops in summers, and that happens. So usually they bite in the web spaces between the toes or on the dorsal surface of the foot. And if the patient is sleeping at night and if the snake finds its way onto the rooftop somehow or the other, it may bite even the hand. We have mainly two types of snakes. One is what we call as cobra, or another is scorpion. So cobra is of two types. Snakes are usually these. One is Elapidae and another is Viperidae. In rural India, particularly in deserts in Rajasthan, we have more of vipers. When they bite, a lot of bleeding takes place. And big black cobras, they produce more of neurological problems.
Yes.
So now the usual practice after snake bite has been making a cut at the site of bite, sucking the poison, putting a tourniquet above the site of bite. All this must go. No bite, no sucking, no cut, no incision, no tourniquet. And you have very nicely depicted, immobilize the limb. Immobilize the limb, that is the dictum. And it is immobilization of the involved limb that helps you in reducing the movement and transfer of the snake venom from the site of bite to the rest of the body. So immobilize, that is the dictum. And there is a mnemonic in literature, says do everything right. But I'm not a big fan of that, because how have they made it right? R for reassurance, I for immobilization, GH, go to the hospital, and T for probably tourniquet, no tourniquet. So go to the hospital is really, You have to remember that GH means, I will say, general holiday. GH. So, but that is what is mentioned in literature. So take the patient to the hospital immediately. Now, at home, you only immobilize and look at the snake, whether it is scorpion or it is a cobra type, and then only, and just look while you are taking the patient to the hospital if he has ptosis or double vision. That is classical of the patient bitten by a snake or licking of blood. And beyond that, nothing should be done. No washing, no incision, no sucking, no tourniquet. You have mentioned all that.
Okay.
So immobilization, that's all. And you can do with any stick that is available in your household. Cricket bat, hockey stick, a danda, any stick. So you must immobilize. If nothing is available, you cannot understand it. Just keep the limb in straight as possible, immobile as possible, even manually. Don't even try to clean the site.
Okay.
So no, that is not recommended. Don't clean the site off with soap and water. It will improve circulation in that area, and if you improve circulation in that area, it will take it away. The returning blood will take snake venom with it. So don't fiddle with the bitten area. Only one thing: immobilize and take the patient to the hospital. Many patients die just because of shock, out of fear of death, which seldom happens otherwise. So, and the literature is full of patients dying because of shock of fear that I've been bitten by a cobra, so I will die. And they go into shock, vasovagal, severe vasovagal, and they die. So reassure them, nothing is going to be happening. You are going to be safe. You will not die. You will not die for sure. And these days, once the patient has reached the hospital, no patient should die because of snake bite. In our series, we have seen that patient after reaching hospital would not die. One. Number two, sometimes cobra bite patients. Nothing happens for first 2, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. There is a suspicion somebody has seen cobra and somebody is suspicious of getting bitten by a cobra, black cobra. And after 7 days, the patient is found in deep coma, not moving any limbs, and the patient is taken for in deep coma or brain death, even by medical professionals. Even these patients should be taken to the hospital, and if they are ventilated, intubated and ventilated, almost all patients will come out. Ventilating these patients, so take them to the hospital. Don't be judgmental at your house that he's gone. The paralysis and such situation may occur within 24 hours as well. So don't take the patient for being dead because he is not responding at all, not moving anything. GCS looks like 3. So all patients with snake bite should usually, the only exception to these is, bite by a black scorpion, which produces intractable shock, refractory shock, and has no answers. And we in India do not have an anti-venom to scorpion venom. But the polyvalent anti-snake venom that we have in our country for other snake bites, particularly viper and elapides, cobras, and kraits, they are very, very effective. We need extra doses, though. So these are very good slides, I must say.
Coming to burns, these are very common, sir, especially mild burns in every day-to-day cooking. It always happens to me also many times.
Right. So they are not going to go there. Such burns are going to stay as long as we are going to heat objects, make food, cook food, make tea for ourselves and other household members. So first thing is don't panic. Two, don't apply any ointment straight away. Water is the best first aid. Cold water is the wash your affected part with water. Cold water if available, ice cold water if you can tolerate even in winters. Wash as long as you can before. If you have to need hospital help, that is you can go later. For most of the trivial burns, you don't need to visit a hospital. It's a household remedy. So the best thing is you wash, for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, your affected burned area with ice cold water. That will reduce the local effect remarkably well, as much as by 90% in most of the cases, if the skin has not peeled off. Now, in case skin has peeled off, you may apply any antibiotic ointment locally. Just clean the whole area with any antiseptic solution. Common household antiseptic solutions. These days you have a lot of them, these sanitizing solutions. You can put a plenty of them, spray a plenty of it on the surface. Otherwise, commonly available betadines, Detolls, Savlons, etc., can be used. In case nothing is available, all households would have, aftershave lotions that can be applied. Some people would have alcohol in their house, so they can wash these with diluted alcohol solution. That is a good thing to be used in cases of emergency. But don't allow any toothpaste. Don't apply any toothpaste. So that will produce problems, right? It will stick to the surface, very difficult to clean. While you will try to clean it, it will pain you, induce pain. Therefore, don't rush to apply these toothpaste, which was advised a lot of times till 5-10 years back. So household the most important thing is, don't allow flies, etc., to your wounds. Wash them very well, and if there is a peeling of skin, then apply one of the antiseptic, antibiotic cream, like containing neomycin, containing gentamicin, betadine.
Okay, so sometimes we get blisters. 1 or 2 blisters will come. So, and sometimes it bursts also. So what to do in that?
So blisters should be broken ideally. Okay. So, they should not be allowed to proliferate, right? And because it contains sterile watery thing inside it, which is not infected. But if you allow it to stay, it is likely to get infected, because some infection will march in through the small pores inside the, this superficial skin over the blister, because it is many a times leaky from one or the other side. So ideal thing is to get help of a medical professional. It should be punctured, cleaned, and dry up. Even no dressing may be needed in trivial blisters. Or if you have to work and protect yourself from flies and insects, then it may even be dressed up.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. We usually used to apply Colgate toothpaste on that.
Right. We did. Even we did.
It gives
Maybe
instant
10 years
relief.
back.
Yeah. So when to go to hospital in case of burns?
Whenever you have burns involving your face, involving your perineum, it may be small, involving your eyes, you must go to the hospital. That's, which may look trivial initially, so you must go. Anything which is looking more than 10%,
Okay.
you must go to the hospital. If it is, you can't see the burns yourself, it is on your back, and you are not sure, and there is no help, you must go to the hospital.
Okay.
Get it examined. But it is not a bad idea to go to hospital and seek advice about every burns by a layman. Just go and get checked up. If anything bad is brewing up, giving tetanus for every burn is not a good idea. What we see in practice that every time, even if you had got a burn yesterday, you got one tetanus, and again today, if you got burnt again a tetanus injection. So if the tetanus injection was received during last 5 years, usually for a trivial burn, you don't need a tetanus injection. So very smart guys would always get a tetanus injection at least. Or
Anything about electrical burns? Switch burns are very common, so electrical burns. But major
electric burns.
Yeah.
So over a period of time, the incidence of electric burns in household is
reduced.
Yes. Because of safety of electrical connections, and but still that would happen. So electrical burns either are just an occasional shock, as you would say, with no burns, and anything more than a shock should always be looked very seriously. And even if the patient may not show immediate signs of some problem, it may occur a little later. Later means after 1 hour, 2 hours or so. So electric burns are usually serious burns, and we also calculate the degree of burn twice the size that we calculate ordinarily by measurement of skin area involved. So if we see that 10% area is burned, that is equivalent to almost 2 to 3 times, because it causes internal issues. It burns, it runs from one part of the body and exits from the other part of the body. And whatever comes its way, it has got a potential to destroy, necrose, and induce death to that particular area or cell. So that might happen. But what I'm saying should be not taken as a scaring narration.
Yes.
I'm just telling that whenever you have more than trivial electric burns, which happens mostly in electrical workers who are working on overhead lines, sometimes there are accidents in household because there will be some problems with coolers, household coolers, because it contains water. Post rains, because of earthings and some naked wires coming into contact with water or surfaces, and then there might be a problem, and there may be issue of electric burn. They should always be taken very seriously if it has been sustained electric burn. When it is happening, the first thing you should be doing is cut off electricity of the household by putting off the main switch. Somebody should rush to put off the switch, and nobody should come and hold the patient who has been involved, because you are providing another chain. Now, series, the current runs in series. So never try to pull the patient away from contact with electric current. You should rush the other way, put off the switches or the supply.
Thank you, sir.
Acid and chemical burns are the same as we have discussed earlier.
Yeah.
Washing with cold water is the best thing you do. Otherwise, if we advise, a lot of things, people do a lot of experiments and may end up in a chaos or confusion. So at household, I would like to advise, just wash with cold water. It may go along. Acid and burns, same. Keep them away from children. Keep them in a locker with key in hands of a responsible person of the house. Don't let your household domestic servants or helps to handle these acids and chemical burns. They should be treated like, high risk medicines in ICU.
Yes, sir.
Like potassium we keep in locker.
Yes, sir.
So similarly, you see, you should keep acid and chemicals if you are storing them in your house for whatever purposes, particularly now even use of acids in toilets has gone, other than in rural areas. We have less potential harm causing toilet cleaning solutions than acids now. So washing your affected part with cold water is the best thing.
Okay, thank you, sir. So moving on to the most important topic of today's discussion, sir, coronavirus.
Okay.
So I have a lot of patients who have a lot of queries, and they all of them ask similar questions.
No problem.
Every time. No, what's up, sir? So first is how to suspect coronavirus infection and how to differentiate it from the common flu because of this weather.
So the answer is very simple. In this corona period, if you have come in contact with a corona patient, COVID patient, and if you have cough, respiratory breathlessness, and malaise, headache, feeling of sickness and fever, exclude COVID. So don't try to differentiate it for common flu. So these days, if you have symptoms like this, it is more likely to be COVID than flu. Take it from us, and if you exclude COVID, you will be much more relaxed. And if you will keep guessing for 2-3 days, and you will do COVID only after 3 days, you will say that it is not going, I must get COVID. And then you get COVID positive, and then you would repent that I should have done a COVID test 3 days back itself. And how many people you infect in the process. I'm not saying that it will induce trouble to you. You are already infected and symptomatic, but you may render harm to your household contacts. So any sickness which resembles COVID, it should be excluded by COVID tests. That's my advice.
Okay, thank you, sir. So next common question is what to eat if you're infected. That's a very common question.
I can tell you what not to eat. So the first answer is eat what you have been eating. And I will be wrong if I would say eat this and you will be protected. But I can definitely advise, if you don't eat all these things, you are less likely to be infected. So don't smoke, don't take alcohol, don't take quick fast food. Take green leafy vegetables, lot of fruits, you know, and be vegetarian. And whatever you eat, whatever your eating habits are, avoid non-vegetarian food for a short period of time, even if you are non-vegetarian. So there is no particular diet which is going to protect, and all these talks of lot of things, vitamin C's and zincs and etc. etc. They should be taken in good amount in routine. And if you start taking vitamin C today, it is not going to protect you tomorrow itself. So don't be under a confusion that you have taken vitamin C, therefore you feel protected. Wear a mask, sanitize yourself, keep social distancing. And that's the mantra.
Okay.
So I have answered your question.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. So, sir, how long does it take for smell and taste to come back? Like for few of my patients, it has been a week and they haven't got it back.
So it may go up to 3 weeks or 4 weeks, or it may be longer time. Now we have patients in world who have not regained their taste and smell even after 3 months. So, but we do not know if they had smell and taste loss even before that. But that was more pronounced after they had COVID. So it's still the whole world is in quandary. The medical scientists are in quandary but mostly it would return in about 2 to 3 weeks time.
Okay. And so what precautions the caretaker has to take who is taking care of a COVID positive patient?
Only three, not a fourth.
Okay, sir.
Sanitization, mask, ordinary double layer surgical mask, not a N95, and social distancing.
Okay.
These three.
Okay. So
Wash your hands repeatedly. Be obsessed with washing hands. Be obsessed with sanitization of your hands. Change clothes after you have been in contact with the COVID patients, arguably. But three things: sanitize yourself every time, repeatedly, wash your hands repeatedly, wear a double surgical mask or a household mask. Ask everybody to wear a mask. That cuts down the possibility of transmission of infection by almost 98%.
So any medications like in between there was a lot of talk about hydroxychloroquine and now it is about Fabiflu and ivermectin.
No medicine helps for protection.
Okay.
There is no prophylaxis other than the three things that I have told you earlier.
Okay.
So no drug recommended.
Okay. After how many days of infection, the patient will not spread infection to others?
You know,
Yes, sir.
I would like to avoid this question.
Okay, sir.
In the sense that first you should have had COVID.
Yes.
Two, you should be eligible to donate blood. Age, hemoglobin, your health. Then it should not be less than 21 days after being negative. And then there are lots of, and last but not the least, plasma is not a magic remedy, magic treatment of COVID. Italian groups, Chinese groups have already written a lot of articles against use of this. Now, if plasma would not give any benefit after transfusion, it can definitely harm. We know blood and blood products are the worst drugs, worst medicines.
Yes, sir.
And they are potential carriers of many diseases, which may be immediate and may precipitate after long term.
Long.
So take plasma, donate plasma, recommend plasma only after consulting the best medical professionals in your reach who have wide knowledge of use of plasma in COVID.
Okay.
Right? So anybody and everybody, Government of India and ICMR has done one good thing, that no medical professional can use plasma or give plasma to his patients without pre-approval of ICMR. Your approval is needed. So donate to a place where it can be stored, who have all the discipline, collection and maintenance of COVID plasma.
Thank you so much, sir. It was a wonderful session and I got to learn, as always, a lot of things from the discussion.
You are welcome. My pleasure, and I've enjoyed every single question, answering. So many questions were tricky, and we are usually used to answering, bedside questions.
Yes, sir.
These were dining table side questions.
Sir, my patients ask this kind of questions only, sir.
No, so it's okay. I also brush up my gray cells.
Okay. Thank
It
you so
helps
much,
me.
sir.
So thank you so
Any
much.
questions are there?
No, ma'am, no questions. No questions.
Okay.
So
So
thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
After we have disconnected from YouTube, have we?
Yes. No, no, sir. So we are ending now. So
Okay.
thank you so much.
Thank you. So thank you so much, Payal. Thank you so much, Reena. And it was wonderful talking to two beautiful ladies.
Thank you so much. A pleasure was ours.
Sweet and very, very nice to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.